YouTube, I think this is going to be a really fun video. So what I'm going to do in this video today is talk to you guys about every single eyeshadow palette that was released in 2017 that I personally bought. Meaning, we'll talk about what led me to buy it, how I felt about it, and how I feel about it now that the hype has died down. I feel like I get the most insight about how people really feel regarding their eyeshadow palette purchases from videos like declutters and collections as opposed to first impressions and even kind of early on reviews where people are still really excited about a product. So I think it'll be really interesting to take a look back and see how I'm feeling now. I bought a total of 13 palettes in 2017 and I returned one, so I ended up getting a new eyeshadow palette a month. I bought 2 from Tarte, Urban Decay, and MAC, so 50% of this entire video is going to be my favorite eyeshadow formulas. That's something I've really learned about myself is those 3 formulas work for me. They just work. And then another interesting note is that I realized if I ever have bought a poor performing eyeshadow palette, or even just a palette that I didn't personally like, I have a tendency, a very strong tendency, to stop buying palettes from that brand. So I actually ended up doing that with Too Faced, who has released so many palettes this past year, and I have bought none of them. The Sweet Peach palette really disappointed me. And it's not that it was a bad formula or palette or color scheme or anything like that. I just never use it. And because of it, I have added to my cart so many times the new Too Faced releases, and I've just never gone through with it. Same deal with Anastasia Beverly Hills. I bought the Mario palette, and please don't be mad at me, but I don't like it. So I've passed up on every single Anastasia release. I feel like there's more, but those are the 2 that come to mind. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to try to do this starting from the beginning of the year and ending with the present. So I believe the first palette of the new year was the Zoeva Matte palette. Now, I enjoyed this palette a lot when I first got it, and what really drew me into this was the bright orange and the bright red in the middle. They were very unique colors at the time, but I think we've seen a lot of those colors appear in a lot of palettes since. It's a good formula, and I do like it. There's some flaws in the palette itself. The darker colors are not the best, but overall, it's a pretty good palette. What happened with this palette and me is I used it kind of often when I first got it, and then I think I just stopped using it. I don't think I've touched this for months. I still think it's good. I think if you don't have these colors, it's a great choice, but I think it's one of those palettes that gets forgotten if you have received these colors in other palettes. And then there's a couple of swatches just so you can see. They're pretty typical mattes in my opinion. That red didn't swatch that well. They're very standard, but they're good, and it's not an expensive palette, so that certainly is a perk. Then I got the MAC in the Flesh, and this is a great palette. I think it's excellent quality, definitely in line with everything else I've tried from MAC. I love palettes in this design. I personally am a fan of a clear cover. I just don't use the mirrors in palettes, so I'd rather have something where I can really readily see what colors are in here. My problem with this palette is I did the same thing as with the Zoeva. I haven't used it in months. Not to say it's a bad formula, just I'm not really tremendously a neutral person, and this has a lot of cool toned options, so I think it would be wonderful for people who are just kind of looking for a natural makeup option, something to, you know, maybe wear to work or something like that. It's good, but the colors in here don't personally speak to me, and it's called In the Flesh. It's perfect for its name, and I think this was the last palette that MAC released in this design. I probably would have bought more. I would have bought the basic series if they weren't so ugly, in my personal opinion. But, I mean, it's nice. The formula is very soft and very easy to work with. Really, an overall pretty palette. I'm definitely not getting rid of this anytime soon. I do like it. I think it encompasses such a wide range of colors for a neutral palette. But it's not something that I use that often at this point in my life. Should I start working in a professional field again, I probably will. I want to say the next release was the Tarte Make Believe in Yourself, and I do love this palette. It is very pretty. It's a really good springtime palette, a little bit more muted in metallicness than some other palettes that I've used, but very pretty. I really do highly recommend this. It's dirt cheap too. It went on sale. Note to self, do not ever pay full price for Tarte. I did have a couple minor criticisms with this palette, but it's all minor stuff. Overall, I think it's a great palette. It blends wonderfully. It's beautiful colors. And I mean, when it comes spring, I will be reaching for this very often once again. Then we have the Lorac Pirates of the Caribbean. And this is a nice palette, but it's too big. Oh my gosh, I think I did the thing that I did with Too Faced and Anastasia with Lorac. I haven't bought a Lorac palette since. Anyway, this palette is giant. It's thick. It's just huge. The shadows inside are small because you're getting so many. I mean, it's great quality, and I absolutely love the green and the blue in here, but the problem is I forget about this palette. I forget about it because of how big and bulky it is. This palette just has to stay somewhere where it's out of my space because it's too big, and because of it, it just ends up in a drawer, and I never ever use it. And I did pay full price for this, and I regret it because they made so many of these, and it sold so poorly that you could get it for, like, what, $25? And Lorac's always been a good formula. It can have a little bit of a learning curve, but I've always enjoyed their formula, and this is no exception. I just wish it was smaller. Like, I don't really regret that I bought this. I do regret that I paid full price. That's about what it comes down to. I regret that I paid full price, and I wish I could figure out a way to incorporate this into my life without having to have so much bulk. I think the next palette that came into my life was the Juvias Place Saharan. Now, I like this palette. It's the warmest toned palette in my entire collection, and it's beautiful for that. Ooh, let's see how that red and orange compare. You can see what I'm talking about with the warmth of it. Look at how warm that red is. That is a bright fire engine red. Not sure what happened with the orange there, but it is a really pretty color on. My problem with this palette, and before I even say anything, because I know people are going to get mad at me, let me just say the Masquerade is an incredible palette, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that, while I do not recommend this. And what I'm going to say is, this palette has one major difference in it than that palette, and that is the addition of mineral oil. Mineral oil is a problematic ingredient, and I probably don't need to explain that to anybody who has oily eyelids, because you already know. When you add mineral oil to an eyeshadow, what happens is you get the most stunning swatches, because you're adding oil. It's essentially the same as swatching over an oil. You would want this palette based off of the swatches alone. They're just so bright and bold. But when you apply them to your eyelids, what happens is they just don't last. These last for maybe 4 hours in intensity, and then they fade, or they blend away as I'm trying to blend them. And I mean, again, I think this is coming back to the addition of oil. Not even to mention the fact that mineral oil can be really a dirty ingredient if you don't know where it comes from or how well it's processed, and I don't know that given that this is from China. I mean, I would not buy this again, and I think I did, yep, I did the thing with Juvia's Place too. I haven't bought a palette since. But it's a shame because I really love the Masquerade. I hope that their new palettes are not using mineral oil. I hope they stop doing that because it just really shouldn't be there. I hope that companies do not make palettes based off of how they swatch, because swatches are just such a tiny portion of the picture. I did want to say something though, and that's that I figured out a better way for me personally to use this. And in particular, that gold in here is I think it's the prettiest gold that I have in my entire collection, but I have to use it with my finger. As long as I apply that with my finger, I do get really pretty color. It still doesn't last as long as it should, but I mean, it is the most stunning gold by far. If I'm going to a photo shoot or I just want to look nice for a couple hours, I definitely have reached for that gold, but I don't often use the mattes in here because of the blending problems. I've explained this already. Let's move on. The MAC Love in the Glades palette. I love this little palette, and something I need to make note of, both in this video and in real life, is that I love small palettes. What I love so much about this palette is when I'm thinking about wanting a gorgeous green, I think about this palette and I have access to just these two incredibly beautiful colors. Actually, those didn't swatch that well, but I promise you they're so pretty on the eye, and that's a big part of why I was saying swatches shouldn't matter. They're so pretty. I looked at the other palettes from the summer collection, and they were very red and orange based, and I just said, I just don't need those. Give me something with cool tones, and I have no regrets whatsoever about picking this up. It is beautiful. I love every color in here, and I love how often I reach for it. The next palette that I purchased was the Urban Decay Naked Heat. I do not have any regrets about getting this. I adore this palette. It is a stunning palette. But like I said earlier in this video, I love Urban Decay's formula. It just works really well for me. All of their palettes have just been wonderful. I even love the Naked 3. Now keep that in mind. It's very important to understand somebody's perspective when you are listening to their opinion. But I do have to say something very important about this palette, and that is do not buy this if you are not madly in love with that color scheme. The most bizarre thing about this palette is the fact that that is the look that you get from this. You get that plus a bunch of mattes. I can't really think of the last popular palette that was like this, where you really only get 1 or 2 looks out of it. And it's hilarious because it's so well loved, because there are a lot of people who love that. And then there's a lot of people who absolutely hate that fact of it. I'm gonna say I'm on team love it. I absolutely adore this palette. I use it all the time. The brush in here is fantastic. I really love this layout. I think this is a very easy to handle and take with you, and just, oh, I adore this palette. Maybe someday I'll even try to figure out how to take the plastic off the mirror, but probably not. Not today. But don't buy this if you're not madly in love with those colors. I really mean that. That's the look that you get. A couple other summer/fall palettes that I bought. I ended up buying the NYX In Your Element Air palette, and I adore this palette so much. Now, as I've said in other recent videos, I've really started to appreciate the drugstore a lot more in this year. And I'm just so happy that this is the pastel palette that I chose to go with. It not only has these gorgeous palettes that are very Lorac I Love Brunch, but it also has in it metallics, a super bright pink. I just think it's an incredible color scheme. You can make so many looks with this, and the formula is amazing. Now, it did retail for $30, which is ridiculous for drugstore, I know. But I believe I paid around $20, and I know it's currently $15. It's currently 50% off on the NYX site. I love it so much. I actually have to say this is one of my favorite palette purchases from this year, just because of how many diverse looks I get from this. And I just said a minute ago I like smaller palettes. Well, this is a really good in-between size. This is more of a medium-sized palette, I would say, but it's also a little on the smaller side. I love it. And very similar to that palette, surprisingly, is the palette that I bought immediately after it, which is the Colourpop My Little Pony. Now, I do not usually buy Colourpop releases for one simple reason. That is that they overwhelm me. But I had to buy this palette, and I don't regret it. However, I've got to be honest with you that a lot of the looks you get from this, for whatever reason, end up being very similar to the Air palette. I have no idea why. I really can't figure this out. It doesn't look like it. I like it. I enjoy it. It was a $16 palette. That's amazing. But I just have to watch myself with Colourpop, because it's very easy to go on the Colourpop website and spend $100 on cheap items without even flinching. And I'm just really trying to be aware, have a lot of self-awareness of not doing that kind of thing. But I was impressed. I think their quality is absolutely incredible. Moving on to what I think is my favorite palette of the year. I do think this is my favorite palette of the year. And that is the Urban Decay Heavy Metals. I hate the packaging. I absolutely hate this packaging. It is horrible, but the palette inside is so incredible. What I love so much about this palette is not just how ridiculously bold it is, but that every one of these shades seems to have a bit of a dark slant to it. It's just really, really gorgeous. And every color in here is unique. I mean, the natural side is not that unique, but it's still useful. I still wear them all the time, but I love the purples and the blues and the greens. They're just, oh, it's so gorgeous. And it was something that I could really use. I really didn't need any more transition shades or in-between shades. I've already got all those. So this is such a perfect palette that I needed in my collection. I highly recommend this, and this is $39 right now, plus an extra 30% off on the Urban Decay website. But let me just tell you, I paid full price for this, and I have no regrets whatsoever, because that means I've had more time to use it. And I feel like that statement should speak volumes as to how much I love it. I love this palette. Alright, moving into the last two palettes of the year. First off, I'm going to start with the Tartelette Toasted. So I'm wearing this palette today, and I've got to tell you guys, I'm really liking it. I'm really enjoying this palette, and I would recommend it over the Urban Decay Naked Heat, because it turns out this is a much more versatile palette. So that is the only shade that is similar to the Naked Heat. The rest of these are actually all quite different, as you can see. So you really do get a variety of looks. And weirdly enough, there's a shade in here that is super reminiscent of a Too Faced formula. It's a matte brown with gold glitter in it, and it works. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous shade. I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think anybody would be able to figure out how to actually get glitter to stick in a matte, and Tarte did it. I've had no problems with blending. Oh, I want to tell you guys my conspiracy theory. No, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to get to my conspiracy theory when I get to the Dose of Colors palette. Yeah, I've had no problems with this. I saw a lot of people said that they had problems with blending it. They said that it was way too powdery, very subculture-ish, which is now the standard by which we measure all powderiness. I've not had any problems. I've been incredibly impressed with this. This Warmth shade is so pretty. Like, I would do a review on this palette, although I feel like they've been done a million times, but I love it. I didn't expect to love it. Now, I will say, I said earlier in this video, don't buy Tarte at full price. I bought this and the Rainforest of the Sea foundation together for $50, and I'm very happy with that purchase. That was a great price. And maybe that does have some sort of an influence on my opinion, because I paid $54 for the Naked Heat. So what did I pay for this? $25? So bear those things in mind. I tell you those things so you can try to dissect other people's biases, or maybe we can all be aware of the biases that we do inherently have. But I love it. Let me talk about my conspiracy theory first, though. And so in order to do that, I have to tell you guys about the Blushing Berries palette, which I currently have in the box, because I'm so close to taking this back. I really don't want to. I really want to keep it, but I'm so frustrated with this palette. This palette is looking really beat up because of how much effort I've put into it. I just put up an entire video on it, and I said, you know, I love it. I don't own these colors anywhere else. And I have a lot of palettes, and I just don't own anything quite like these colors. But man, do I ever have patchy problems with these. It even did it in the swatches. It even did what I dislike in the swatches. Do you see how patchy that is? Swatches don't matter that much, but that is how they apply on me. And I've had some really great suggestions. I've been using a fluffier brush. I've been setting my primer with basic setting powder, and all those things help, but overall it's just still patchy on me. So let me tell you my conspiracy theory. So I ordered this, and it shipped air. The Tartelette Toasted I purchased in store. I hypothesize that the reason we see some people say that they love a powdery formula and other people say they hate it has to do with what a palette went through before it got to us. This went on a truck to the store. That's how all products are delivered to the store. They come on a gigantic truck. You know, I'm sure they rattle down the road a little bit, but they're not really going through anything too extreme. So there was nothing that, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, there was nothing that could have happened to this palette to kind of jar the powder inside. So it all sticks pretty flat. It's really not powdery for me. It's not, even though I've heard from other people that it is. Whereas this is powdery and problematic, and this also went by air. So this palette went on an airplane way up high in the altitude, landed at MSY where it did the obligatory wobble, then went over to UPS where I'm completely convinced my UPS people juggle packages. Is that what it is? Do you guys deep down want to go work in the circus and y'all juggle all my packages? Maybe that too. But no, jokes aside, follow me here. I think that that is a lot of trauma for a palette. It's a lot of shaking it up, and I think to some extent it's rattling the powders and making that extra powderiness happen. I love y'all's opinions. Please let me know, because something I observed when I was watching Tartelette Toasted reviews is that people who ordered it and had it shipped air had powdery problems. Even with the subculture, people who bought it in stores seem to have less problems. Even the people like Alyssa Ashley, who had it shipped to them, had a lot of problems with it. I think there's something going on there. You guys know I sit around and think about these things. I'm a conspiracy theorist at heart. I'm not. But no, something is really up, and I think I might be onto it. And there's one other palette that I purchased in 2017. That is the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette. I returned it. But I gotta tell you, the reason I returned it is not because I hated that palette. It was not a terrible palette. It wasn't the best formula, but I returned it because I already had every single shade in there. I think, and I said this in my review of that palette, I really was shocked that Huda had decided to reuse shades in a new palette that was still retailing for $65.70 after tax. I'm so confused by that, and I don't understand the logic. And the problem for me, and this was my personal problem that a lot of people took offense at, but for me, I had realized after I bought it that some of the most appealing colors in there I already owned. For example, that gorgeous purple. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys this one just one more time. This is the Stila Sea Siren. It's the same exact color as the one in the palette. I'm out of places to swatch. That is the exact same color. I just couldn't justify it. It was $70. And something I'm really interested in observing about myself is what happens the next time Huda releases a palette like that, will I buy it again? Will the act of me returning and getting my money back on something that didn't work out for me change my future reactions towards the company? Or will I continue to avoid the company because I've had a bad experience? And I don't know the answer yet. I know that I've been looking at the little tiny Huda palettes, but they're so small. Oh my gosh. They're only $27, but they're just so small. I don't know. I just said I like small palettes. Should I get one of those? Decisions. Alright guys, so that has been a year in palettes. I really feel like my arm right now speaks volumes about myself as a person. Even though I dressed myself so down today, I'm trying to decide if I want to do my hair brown. Y'all know it's red, it's bright pink right now. I'm trying to decide if I want to give it a break. I digress. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. I have a couple more videos in this series coming. I'm going to be talking about all my favorites and my fails. Those videos are always so fun and I find them helpful too. And I'm not going to limit myself in those. That's going to be an overall of my entire makeup collection. So definitely make sure you're subscribed if you're at all interested in those videos. And thank you so much for watching. Peace out, YouTube.